Hello, my name is Shauna, and I have been obese since probably about the age 10 or 12. I have been going through many different attempts to lose weight and achieve a normal weight, and I've learned many things along the way. I've spent a lot of money, and I'm hoping to convey to you some of the things that I have learned along the way as I embark on this next attempt, and hopefully you won't make the same mistakes that I do. So the first thing that I would like to talk about today is how weight loss for the morbidly obese is just different, seriously. And so I'm presenting this as sort of a thing to encourage you that if you are going to be handing over a bunch of money to someone, whether it's going to be a coach, a personal trainer, any kind of a weight loss program, or maybe you do meal replacements, whatever it is, I encourage you to ask the person who you are going to be handing over money to and allowing them to lead you and guide you. Ask them, how is weight loss different for the morbidly obese? What are the different types of challenges that morbidly obese people will have to go through? And then assess their answers and consider some of the things that I am presenting here today and see if you're still comfortable with them. You may save a lot of money and not be stupid like I was. The first thing I'd like to bring up is this is sobering. I swear it's not going to be all depressing. I am going to leave on some positive notes, but let's just get sober and let's just get real here. Your chances of reaching a normal body weight are very low. So this is something that is very important that I want to stress, is that we should be science-based and evidence-based on the choices that we are making. Everybody says that. Everybody likes to show their study that's going to support their particular diet, their particular intervention. But in the end, your chances are very low, and we'll get into the ones that actually have more of a chance of working, that statistically do work more over time on achieving some results. But let's just get very clear on what the reality is for the morbidly obese. So all these studies that I am taking a screenshot of the title for you, I will link them down in the description so that you can go read them for yourself. But this first one here was, the probability of an obese person attaining normal weight, body weight, and this was a cohort using health records. So basically, during a maximum of 9 years of follow-up, they tracked thousands of people, and so the annual probability of attaining normal weight was 1 in 210 for men and 1 in 124 for women, and that was if they were just overweight. That was just simple obesity. Okay, if they were morbidly obese, then the probability of them would go down to 1 in 1,290 men or 1 in 677 for women. And also on top of that, the annual probability of achieving a merely 5% weight reduction was 1 in 8 for men and 1 in 7 for women with morbid obesity. And actually, I don't want to downplay what a 5% weight reduction can do to increase your health and extend your lifespan and just overall make you feel better and enjoy your life. So I do not want to belittle the achievement of a 5% weight reduction. On another video that I intend to make about bariatric surgery, by the way, I have not had bariatric surgery. I do not at this point want bariatric surgery. I'm going to give weight loss another go before I choose to do that. But in one of my other videos that I want to make about bariatric surgery, we'll dive into more of those statistics of what each of these extra 5-10% reductions in body weight for the morbidly obese can do for you. There's a reason why insurance companies are encouraging bariatric surgery. It is not out of the kindness of their heart, and it's not just to get money. It is because actually for them to save money. Because right now, over time, the intervention that has the greatest lasting improvement in weight and health for weight loss is bariatric surgery. Does that mean, I didn't say that is the greatest chance of reaching a normal weight is bariatric surgery. I'm just saying the intervention that has the greatest return on results in terms of your overall health that they have seen, just statistically. Okay. And so they're like an insurance company, so they're just going to go by statistics. So that'll be for another video. But the conclusion of this study was that the probability of attaining normal weight or maintaining weight loss is very low, and that obesity treatment frameworks that were grounded in community-based weight management programs, these were the ones that they were kind of looking at in this study, they didn't seem to really be that effective. So that was something for them to consider. There is also little difference between which type of diet you use in the long term. So this is a study that I'll present for you to go read through, encourage you to. Dietary and behavioral strategies for weight loss and weight loss maintenance, a narrative review. This one was really, basically it would kind of show the differences in weight loss, after I think it was like a 12 or 16 week intervention. Sorry, I didn't put the clips of that because I wanted to get to some of these other points that this narrative review makes. But basically, when you dive into the statistics of if you were doing low fat or low carb or Mediterranean or just a overall calorie restriction without any specific macros, one out the gate might have a little bit more weight loss than the other, but when they follow these people, these cohorts up over time, after like 6 months or a year or 2 years, the differences between them was very negligible. And in terms of how many people stayed on one versus the other, there wasn't too much of a difference. But one thing that I felt was really important to point out when it was really trying to dive into the maintenance that people have of their weight loss, one thing that was kind of depressing, and just, again, it's a sober reality we need to prepare ourselves for, was that ghrelin. Ghrelin is that hunger hormone that makes us feel hungry. So basically, in individuals with obesity who lost approximately 13% of their body weight, their total ghrelin levels went up. And here's the thing, they didn't go down to baseline even after they achieved their weight loss and they were going through maintenance. That even after 12 months of maintaining their weight, they still remained 16% above their baseline. And then another study reported an 18% increase in ghrelin after 6 months of weight loss, which remained elevated at the 24 months or 2 years after they have lost weight, and they didn't have any weight regain. Their ghrelin levels, their hunger levels, were still higher. And we're going to get into the effects of that in some later slides. Also, weight loss was associated with changes to satiety-related hormones. So there was reductions, and I'm not even going to try to read those words. But here's the thing that's important for this presentation. Compared with lean individuals, those with obesity demonstrated lower postprandial responses of peptide YY and GLP-1 both before and after weight reduction. And in some observations, the reduced concentrations of these hormones persisted for several months following the end of intervention. And so again, the hormone levels inside obese people are completely different than with lean individuals or just the moderately overweight individuals. And these hormones affect how we feel. They affect our hunger. They affect our feelings of satiety. And so, of course, there are going to be different outcomes with people that are dealing with different hormones in their body. And no amount of intervention necessarily healed them or made them better. It's just that some people found ways to overcome it, get used to it, and other people continue to struggle with it. Also, the differences, like I said before in the last slide, the differences are very modest between the different diets. And so all of the studies that were really looking at all these different diets in terms of the different macro ratios, the different methodologies for morbidly obese people specifically, they basically came down to the conclusion that individual preferences are what's recommended here. Because at a 2-year follow-up, and again, these were all very modest, the low-carb group had eked out the greatest weight loss. I mean, all groups that there were major interventions for weight loss. They had they were looking at people who lost weight and maintained a certain amount of weight loss after a 2-year follow-up. And so the low carb group had the greatest weight loss. I mean, we're talking like just a couple of extra kilograms, so like 4 or 5 pound difference. So if you're a morbidly obese person, choosing between these ones, it's not going to be a perceptible difference. Now, if you're in that club of people that just want to lose 30 pounds, 40 pounds, they want to get off the baby weight, okay, then maybe there might be a difference for you. But I'm talking to the morbidly obese people like myself. Low carb had the greatest reduction in the ratio of total cholesterol to high density lipoprotein. Again, it was modest. All groups that lost weight had improvements in all these factors. Diabetics had a marginally better glucose and insulin levels with the Mediterranean versus the low-fat diet. That one I put on there because I was sucked into the vegan and extremely low-fat diet cult for about 5 to 6 years. And so I think it's interesting that really there's really not that much data to support that overall. And so again, remember the differences are small. This article in particular, which was in the New England Journal of Medicine, it's recommending basically individual choice and choosing something that's going to work best for individual preferences, their lifestyle, things like that. It's not just psychology. Our brains are different. This first study up at the top, it's from the previous slide, if you're trying to find this text right here. So basically, individuals with obesity exhibited greater activation of the reward-related regions of the brain. One study found higher postprandial activation of the prefrontal cortex in individuals with class 3 obesity compared with those are class 1 or 2 obesity. So what does that mean? It means that not only does the obese person's brain fire up differently when they eat food, but the level of obesity there is a correlation between that activation and the level of obesity. So it's going to tend to be more intense for the more obese that you are. So I think this is kind of, we are starting to all kind of take in and understand the importance of our actual brains and the hormones and the chemicals in our brain. That's not as controversial anymore. But what I think does seep into diet culture is this idea that we're just going to be able to completely hack our brains. And we should, if we do all the right things, we're going to just fix all these things inside of us. And we should be able to achieve the same success as anybody else, even the people that just want to lose 30 pounds. And so there's lots of studies out there. We don't need to guess at this stuff. We can see. So this is one study in particular. Do mindfulness-based interventions change brain function in people with substance dependence? So of course, this one didn't specifically call out food addictions and things like that, but it's similar parts of the brain that are being singled out and studied here. So I wanted to include it. So mindfulness-based practices, they were correlated with greater mindfulness, lower craving, and lower use of the drugs of choice. But that being said, I wanted to make the point that these were like very specific mindfulness practices. Like they were taking Buddhist practices or it's just a very specific practice. It wasn't necessarily just a breathing exercise to calm yourself. It's a little bit more than that. But it was not really that significant of a difference. And we'll get to kind of the people who succeed at weight loss, we'll kind of look at the interventions that they use and don't use, and we'll dig into that a little bit more. But the point is that let's not become hopeless, because there does seem to be some evidence that we can change the brain, and maybe this will get better over time. But again, it is at this point in time, it doesn't really make that significant of a difference. Which again, even mindfulness training gives small improvements. Okay, so this is a meta-analysis of all the physical and psychological health outcomes. So one thing that I wanted to, it was looking at the different behavioral therapies and interventions for weight loss for obese people. And when you, in terms of maintenance of your BMI, it didn't really have too much of a correlation. And also when you go at follow-up for like long periods of time, the good studies that have a lot of people and have a lot of controls and things like that, they didn't see any difference between the people who went through these various psychology-based interventions and the people who did not. The only ones where it was detectable were ones where it was like it was a case study of like 3 people. And so at that point, you're at the level of anecdotes. And so, of course, there's anecdotes for everything. We can find an anecdote for everything. Digging into the data, if you do want to go take a look at that one, if there was a type of therapy that was a little bit more effective than the other, but again, marginal differences, it was the acceptance and commitment therapy form of cognitive behavioral therapy. This is one that, rather than trying to re-perspectivize negative feelings and emotions and see it from a different way and think of it in a different way, it focuses more on just accepting the negative feeling and kind of trying to find a coping mechanism in a way of being more resilient to it. So that was marginally more effective, but there really aren't great studies in this. So who knows what we might discover as time goes on. So let's talk about who succeeds and what are they like. This was a really great one. This was, a lot of people, a national weight control registry. So these were people, they self-reported, so they advertised to people, and it was like, have you maintained at least 30 pounds or more of weight loss over, I forget the period. You'll have to go look at the actual study. But the point was, there were advertisements put out that were like, hey, come sign up for this registry if you can document that you have lost and maintained at least a 30-pound or more weight loss over an extended period of time. So they gathered all the data and they got all the people, and they were able to find pretty clear clusters where like your chances of being in any one cluster and not having the attributes of another cluster were like really significant. It was like over 2/3 chance. So, and there was not too many outliers. And so they were pretty confident in stating that the people who succeed in maintaining weight loss, they kind of fell into these 4 groups. And so I'm going to have a slide on each of these. We're going to dig into what they're like and what they did. The cluster 1, so most people who are succeeding at maintaining weight loss, they are what I am calling the normies who lost their way. So these are people who were normal weighted for most of their life, gained some weight, and then they were able to get it off. Cluster number 2 were the biggest losers. These are the people that had like real obesity or morbid obesity. The average weight loss was like 100 pounds. And so they have a particular demographic and conditions. We'll discuss those. Cluster 3, nailed it on one shot. These are people that they never really tried to diet in their life. They got to a point in their life where they put on some pounds, they needed a diet, and they just kind of decided it, and they did it, and they were successful at it, and they've maintained the weight loss pretty effortlessly. And then cluster 4, I'm just calling it dialing everything down. And this tends to be the older cohort. They're a little bit more unhealthy, and so they're just kind of dialing everything down. They're dialing down how much they eat. They're dialing down how much activity they do, and they're able to just kind of maintain things for that reason. One thing stood out at me from this study. Down here at the bottom, the average calorie intake and physical energy expenditure. These are people that are maintaining. Some of the people in each of the clusters were trying to continue to lose more, but most people in each of those cohorts, the majority of the people in each of these clusters were just maintaining their weight. I mean, let's just say like on average, 1,400 calories a day. I don't know about you, But every coach I have been to, because I am morbidly obese, they try to tell me I should be eating like 2,500 calories a day. And I tell them I'm barely going to lose any weight on that. And they don't want to believe me. And I can count calories. And if I don't count my calories and take my pictures of it, they're not going to believe me. And who the fuck has time to do that? So I want to ask you right there, does your coach recommend this? Because people who are succeeding at maintaining their weight loss, this is generally and look at what you're saying here. What I find interesting here, based on their level of physical activity, they are supposedly burning more calories than they are eating, yet they are maintaining. So something is going on here. This is a self-report, so there probably is a high margin of error. But in general, especially for like the cluster 1 people, the cluster 1, and we'll get to their slide next so you can see, justify what I'm going to say right now. They're kind of like the most even keel, the most stable. It's kind of like their lifestyle. They're probably the least likely to be, not reporting correctly. And they're, just sitting below 1,400 calories a day. So think about that and get kind of clear and sober about that, because this seems to be kind of what it's taking. Now, I know I'm pretty tall, I'm 5'10". I've followed some people who are the biggest losers, and they are eating more than 1,400 calories a day. But I think we need to be clear that people who are maintaining their weight loss you'd probably be surprised how little they're eating compared to what you think, what your diet guru, what your coach, what your trainer is trying to tell you that you need to eat. So let's dig into it. Cluster 1, the normies who lost their way. This cluster was the healthiest one before weight loss. They had low levels of depression and neuroticism. Only about 3% were ever obese. So these are people that were just overweight. They weren't yet reaching into the obese or even morbidly obese categories. And they were able to maintain a 30 to 60 pound weight loss below their maximum. How they did it. So this group, they were the least likely to use interventions. 56% just did it on their own. The next intervention, if they were to do anything, were exercise classes. They didn't really reach out to professionals, doctors, counselors, self-help groups, anything like that. This group also had the highest level of physical activity. They were just generally avoidant of high-fat foods. They didn't necessarily follow any particular diet, necessarily like keep track of their calories or anything like that. They just kind of kept the high-fat food out of the house, tried not to eat it. And the one thing that they did was like they were the highest on like the regular weigh-ins. They were just constantly having that kind of daily or weekly accountability to themselves. And also they just report that it wasn't that hard for them to maintain their weight loss. And there's probably just, again, we'll kind of loop back to it, those hormones, kind of their set point on these hormones. These people, I forgot to put this on here, this was one of the lowest groups in terms of having childhood weight problems or another family member who had weight problems. So these are people who are probably genetically or hormonally, they were always kind of more normal. And then they had something happen in their life that made them deviate and gain some weight. And so they were able to course correct and get back to that they don't report it being that difficult. All right, so let's do cluster number, Cluster number 2, the biggest losers. This cluster was the one that had the poorest health before weight loss. The health markers that they focused on were ones that are very dietary related. So we're talking like thyroid issues, hypertension, cholesterol, arthritis, thyroid problems, diabetes, obviously. So it's not including things like cancer and stuff like that. Those would probably be like outliers that they didn't really focus on for this weight and weight maintenance study. So these are people that were just, and sleep apnea was another one. So the cluster number 2 people, they are sicker. So they're feeling shittier. They have higher levels of depression and stress. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? For a future video that we can discuss. These clusters started with higher BMIs. The average starting BMI was 44.7. These people were maintaining at least 100 pounds below their maximum. This cluster had the highest rates of childhood obesity and being overweight and having overweight family members. And this cluster reports that it is the hardest for them to maintain their weight loss. How do they do it? So this cluster used the most different types of intervention. So there really wasn't like a strong type of intervention or methodology that really stood out. Like you can see, only about 38% did it on their own. The next one, 30% are using commercial programs. Commercial programs could be anything from like meal replacement things or like Weight Watchers or things like that. And then there's another peppering of like the self-help groups, the exercise classes, going to counselors and therapy and things like that. So this group tend to use like a bunch of those things, whatever worked for them. They had a high level of physical activity. They were almost up there with the cluster 1 people. So these people they're moving their butts. This one also rates having a specific dietary strategy as part of the key to their success. These are the ones that are listing that they're focusing more on trying to be low carb or to be low fat or to count their calories, something like that. And also they're focusing on different things that help them buffer against social and emotional conditions. Again, think about the family inheritance thing here. There's probably some more social conditions that they're having to deal with. I know that I'm a cluster 2 to a T, but I haven't lost anything. But if I were to lose, I'd be cluster 2. Cluster 3 are the nailed it in one shot people. They had the best health prior to weight loss, even though this cluster tended to be a little bit older. They had super low levels of depression and stress. They were the most educated. By the way, being very educated and having low levels of depression and stress in your life, there's also a class, dimension there. These people had no prior weight loss attempts. They also had the lowest starting BMI. So again, they had the least amount to lose. And also with the lowest starting BMI, they were probably metabolically in a better position to begin with. And they maintained at least 30 pounds below their maximum. They were also the least likely to have been overweight as a child. They report the least amount of effort to maintain diet and exercise. They were also the least likely to use interventions. 72% just completely did it on their own. They were less likely to have specific strategies. The big ones that they do, again, similar to cluster number 1, they just weigh themselves regularly to keep them in balance, and they just focus on keeping healthy foods in the house, and so they don't have temptation around them. And again, they report the least difficulty in maintaining weight loss. Cluster 4, dialing everything down. So this cohort, like I mentioned before, they tend to be older and the least healthy. They have like more thyroid and arthritis. So that's probably contributing that they're really not doing, this was the group that did the least amount of physical activity, but they were able to maintain at least, and the average weight loss that they were maintaining was about 30 pounds below their maximum. And they also didn't really have a high incidence of childhood or family weight issues too. How they do it, this group was more likely to use self-help groups and professionals, and they were the least likely to modify their physical activity. So it's probably one of those things where they're stuck because of their thyroid, their arthritis, their age, their health conditions. They don't really feel like doing physical activity, so they're going to reach out and try to grab another tool in the tool bag. Their focus overall is on eating fewer meals per day and just lower proportion of those calories coming from carbohydrates. So this is like they're getting older, they're getting slower, and they're just sort of dialing everything down to accommodate that. And that's how they are maintaining their weight loss. So what are the key takeaways that I see from this? Mental health matters. So the ones that are trying the hardest and the ones that are, even though they're successful, they still report high levels of depression, high levels of anxiety and neuroticism, and that affects their weight loss. They also, having a healthy childhood and healthy family matters. And the key takeaways are there was no specific diet, no exercise program, no specific therapy or intervention that showed significant improvement one way or the other. The things that they kept surrounding on the groups that were, really successful is whatever method keeps you consistent, happier, more resilient to stress, and more active overall will be the key to your success. And so my takeaway from this is to not ever let a person convince you that their protocol, their diet, their therapy, or their masterclass is better than anything else. If you're not happy, if you're not feeling more resilient, if you're not feeling like you can consistently do whatever their program is, you are not broken. You do not need to submit yourself to their brainwashing. You just need to find something that's going to work for you, because it's going to be very different for everybody else. So that leads me to the final thing, my future videos. So some of the topics that are related to what I discussed today that I would like to expand upon in the future is that all diets have a similar mortality rate and longevity. Yes, they do, when you adjust for BMI and other cofactors. So we have to pick our struggle. So there's a lot of, like I said, I'm coming from, I was vegan for 5.5, 6 years-ish, and wasn't really working for me. And I got really seeped into that mentality, and I was believing all of these, observational studies, and those are very hard to adjust for cofactors. And so when you adjust those for BMI and other cofactors like smoking and high risk behavior, again, the differences in mortality rates and longevity get super negligible. Now, I will give the caveat, certain diets do appear it's easier to maintain certain BMIs. There may be that certain types of diets it's just easier to stay thinner. But even those studies, they have conflicting studies, because again, as we're kind of seeing from what I just presented today, how you were before you started a diet can really affect how that diet is for you. So people who are coming from morbid obesity and like huge metabolic dysregulation, certain diets might feel different for them. Another one that I want to go over, some of the studies that, if you read the studies that I link here today, you might find some of the foreshadowing of this. But one thing that we're always told as morbidly obese people is like, oh, don't lose it fast. You just need to lose it nice and slow, 1 to 2 pounds a week, no more than that. Because if you don't, you'll regain it. That is absolutely false. And in fact, for the morbidly obese people, initial fat weight loss may tend towards creating lasting success, because it seems that momentum equals motivation for the people who need to be the long haulers. And more specifically, why fast weight loss does not lead to regain is because, again, it's one of those things where if you look over time, like let's say a 2-year period, the people who lose weight fast, they may regain it faster. But if you go over a 2-year period, most people are regaining most of what they lose, regardless of what dietary intervention they take, with some nuances. And we can't really be sure the total reason for this. There's not the greatest studies, but one of the things that they are looking at as the reason for this is because as you lose weight, your basal metabolic rate goes down, because most people across the board, when you lose weight, you lose everything. You lose fat, you lose lean mass, you lose water, and so as you're losing that lean mass too, you will burn fewer calories a day. And so when you stop your dietary intervention, whether it is fasting, meal replacement, or low and slow, it doesn't really matter. Once you stop that intervention, the weight tends to creep back up because you have changed your metabolic rate. And so one of the ones that I want to get into, and again, this is where there is emerging science on this and research on this, but still it's kind of can be inconsistent. This might be one of the reasons why for some people, high protein diets, we're talking like up to 1.6 grams, I think it's per pound of like your lean body mass, like what you want your body mass to be. That might help people maintain their weight loss a little bit better than others, especially for the morbidly obese people who need to be the long haulers. There might be multiple reasons for this that they're poking at. So more satiety, I mean, that's just known. Protein is more satiating. You stay fuller longer the more protein that you eat. And then also you might have less of a decrease in that metabolic rate, because if you're able to maintain your muscle mass while you're losing weight, then your basal metabolic rate will not go down so much during your weight loss. So these are future videos that I'm going to make. If you have anything else that I've talked about in this video that you'd like to hear some more thoughts on, let me know and I'll try to oblige you. But until then, let's connect. I am on YouTube, I am on TikTok, and I'm on Instagram. Instagram is where I'm going to post more of my kind of day in the life things that I'm doing right now to try to reach a healthy weight for myself. So until next time, it's been a pleasure, and I hope to see you and talk to you sometime. Bye-bye.